Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Gatekeepers. I am Bishop Vanessa Brown, your host and moderator for this evening. We're excited to have you here. We want to greet everybody on Facebook and on YouTube and on Instagram tonight. We say welcome, welcome, welcome. Even those of you that might be on LinkedIn, we say welcome to you tonight. We have an incredible show set up for you on tonight, and we are excited about our guests. I want to make sure that you all are sharing if you can and if you will for us on Beyond the Gatekeepers. We want to get as many views as possible, particularly around this conversation. I think that people don't really want to have this conversation, but I think that we have to have it. We have to push the envelope. It's time for us to have this particular conversation. So you know what I like to do? I like to shout you out. I like to know where you're from. And so do me a big favor and start putting in your chats where you're from, where, you know, your name, where you're from. I see your name, but let us know where you are from so we can shout out the place that you are from as well. We see people from all over the world coming into Beyond the Gatekeepers. We are always excited for family and friends being amongst us, hearing all of the conversations that we have, whether they are with authors or artists or politics or sex and sexuality, gender, religion, all of the things. We want to invite people to come out and be a part of these conversations on tonight. And so, yeah, do me a favor. Let me know where you're from. I'm going to start shouting you out on tonight. And so tonight we have dear brother who is consistent with us, Chuck Hunt. Thank you for watching from Monroe, Louisiana. We say good evening to you all. Our dear brother also from Colleen, Texas, brother Albert Reed. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Longtime friend of mine, amen. Didrick J. Joe is in the house. Pennsylvania is here. Minister David Williams is in the house, and Christopher Williams is in the house. This couple, they belong to my church, and they have been together for 17 years. And so I celebrate Minister David Williams and Brother Christopher on tonight. And they're watching from New Jersey. Darlene Connell is here, Queens, New York. We say good evening to you, Darlene. Deacon Valerie Moore is here from Queens, New York. Right now, Atlanta, Georgia is her place. Marvetta Walker, Pastor Marvetta Walker, we welcome you tonight. Houston, Texas is in the house. Hackensack by way of Harlem and Brooklyn. That's right. We have Reverend Lucian Washington here with us. We say good evening to you. He is one of the sons of Thunder with Dr. Charles Waterson as well, and they are students at MTSO. And Dr. Common, who is our guest on tonight, is one of their professors. And so we say good evening to you all, repping Ohio tonight by way of New York City. And then we have Elder Sharon Gill here with us from Baltimore, Maryland. And with the list goes on. I know more people will come in the room, and we want to invite you to tell more people that we are on. We'd like to see you all. I thank you. Thank you, Cheryl Robinson Moore. She's watching us from YouTube. Old Fallon, Missouri is in the house. Old Fallon, Missouri is in the house. So we got people on YouTube. We got people watching as well on Facebook and on Instagram. And so we say good evening to each and every one of you tonight. Certainly, I want to bring on Bishop Flunder. Bishop Flunder is our presiding bishop of the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries. Bishop Flunder is also the senior pastor of City of Refuge United Church of Christ. And so, of course, we always welcome this sage voice and the wisdom of our prelate. And we're so glad that you're here tonight, Bishop Flunder. Will you greet our online audience?
With joy and gladness. It is both my privilege and my joy to be in the company of such an incredible group of listeners, of thinkers, of leaders, of folks that are so engaged in this time that we are in. We have to be engaged. Ain't no closets in this one. This is a time to be engaged. And so I'm very, very, very thrilled to have Dr. Kate with us tonight and having an opportunity to talk about where and how we need to move together in such a time as this. And it is a time. Every day we wake up in the morning and something
every day there is something.
I have a picture of Mother Shirley and I in the very part of the White House where we were together, sitting together on some of the same couches, making ready to receive affirmation from the then President of the United States. And it just got me when I saw the bulldozers tearing down that part of the people's house and thinking to myself, there's no telling what will go up in its place. It's subject to be real tacky and full of gold. That part I know. But I think the most important thing is that the people, once again, didn't have a voice in what it was that occurred. And so that is the time that we are in, but we have to work together. Thank you so much, Bishop Vanessa, for knowing how important it is for us to work together for justice and for freedom and for righteousness. God bless you.
God bless you too, Bishop. And I think this conversation tonight with Dr. Kate Common is going to bring and shed a lot of light on some of the things that need to happen, what here, so many things that she gives voice to that I think that we, not we, meaning me and you, but many people have been afraid to have a
Yeah.
conversation about. Right?
Yes.
So tonight, everyone, we have a great author for us, a professor, designer, and scholar in queer and feminist theory and theology, ecclesiology, practical theology, design thinking, and leadership in the person of Dr. Kate Common, who has written a book. And that book tonight is called Undoing Conquest, Ancient Israel, the Bible, and the Future of Christianity. Now, I need y'all to take that in slowly and digest that. Undoing Conquest, Ancient Israel, the Bible, and the Future of Christianity. Like, I wish that I could have a ton of evangelicals watching this show tonight so that they can hear, and not just white evangelicals, but black evangelicals too, that need to hear this conversation.
Mm.
So, Dr. Kate, I'm going to start off by asking you to say hello to our virtual audience tonight.
Hello, everybody. I'm just really excited to be here with you all for it is such a time, as Bishop Flunder said. So I hope I can just share some of the wisdom that I've been working on and hope that it connects. And if you have questions, you can always reach out to me virtually. Bishop Brown, I think, has the website, but yeah, I want to see this as the opening of a dialogue, not just a one conversation. So really grateful to be here with y'all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Kate. I want to start off by asking you the origins and motivation. So what compelled you to write Undoing Conquest is my first question. And my second question is, was there a particular moment or encounter that made you realize the church needed this kind of reckoning with its own story?
Okay, well, thanks for those questions. I'm gonna start out first by just giving a little bit of my background, because then it's gonna make sense why I got started on this path. So I grew up in Ohio in a very evangelical and also Catholic family. So I was getting this perspective of both biblical literalism and rich tradition of the Catholic tradition. And this was the 90s when I came out. So when I came out as queer, it was a very difficult time. Wrestling, I mean, everything I had heard about queerness was that it was a sin, that it was demonic. And I spent many years wrestling, praying the gay away, and also with a deep respect for the Bible, wrestling with these biblical texts, these clobber passages that said, you know, it wasn't okay to be gay according to these interpretations. So I was always wrestling with the text. And that's what really sparked my journey to seminary and to theological research. I felt a sense of call to, once I had started to reconcile and feel like, no, I had a place as a gay Christian. I felt the sense of call to go to seminary to become a queer pastor, basically, try to create a more just church. Um, and it took me a while to get there. I had a career in graphic design. And so it's 2008. I'm starting seminary and I'm in my intro to Hebrew Bible class. And the professor one day starts talking about how a new origin story of the Israelite people emerged through archaeology this past 100 years. And it actually kind of counters the violent conquest story that we have in the book of Joshua, and shows instead that it seems that the early Israelites emerged from what we might think of as a justice movement, folks leaving empire and creating more justice-seeking communities on the margins. And for me, I describe it as a record-screeching moment. I'm like, what? What did you just say? But the professor just carried on. And I'm looking around the room. I felt like this was this was huge news. And as someone who had grown up with the biblical stories, with a deep respect for the text, I was like, how have I not heard this before? And why aren't we spending all class talking about it? And why is everyone else not sort of freaking out hearing this? And that was the first time that I got introduced to the fact that there was a different origin story at the origins of our biblical traditions that had something different to say than the violent text that we have with us in Joshua. And that started really this journey towards both wanting to learn as much as I could about both the biblical texts. Where did we get these violent texts? Where did it come from? And also, what is this archaeological information? What does it mean for us, both as Christians, but as collectively as the church? And so that sparked a long academic journey and theological journey into thinking through these questions. And eventually that then landed me in a PhD program and writing the book. And so this really inspires my thinking about the church and where we're headed. And I'll say that I'll add this thread that initial impulse that I had to go to seminary to become a queer pastor to help shape the church. Early on, when I started studying feminist and queer theologies, I started to realize, wow, the way that LGBTQ plus people are treated in the church is a symptom of these deeper issues of patriarchy, white supremacy, sexism, racism. All these deep roots that are in the foundations of our traditions are the reasons why queer folks and other folks continue to be marginalized. And so for me, these two things, sort of the foundations of the Israelite tradition, the foundations of our faith traditions, and seeking ways in which they can become more just, really helps me live into that call. So I don't see that my call has changed. It's just taken on a different a different way than I could have imagined, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I forgot to say before I started all these questions with you that we want to dedicate tonight's show to Miss Major. Many of you know that she's a transgender icon in our community who slipped away on last week. And so we certainly want to make sure that we name that on this evening. Wanted to also say there are more people coming in. Jalen Tasby is here. Mm-hmm. And Colette Walker, St. Louis is in the house. Bishop Sonia Williams is on. I want to make sure that I shouted them out as well. And so, Dr. Kate, when I'm hearing you talking and you talk about the text, I hear you talking about also, I think about Dr. Tribble, who also passed away, and the text of terror. And so I hear that a lot, and I hear that as well as it relates to the word conquest and what we did to the Bible as well. But there is something that you talk about, and I name it as archaeological disruption. You say, and I'm going to bring you in, Bishop Flunder, on this. You bring archaeology into conversation with theology, right? And I want to know from you what discoveries in the Highland settlements most challenge the traditional biblical story of Israel's conquest, and why does that matter for people of faith today? I think it's important that people hear you answer this question because there's a lot of noise and a lot of confusion around this.
Great. Yes, I'm happy to. So archaeology started as a practice in Israel and Palestine around 100 years ago, let's say, roughly. And sort of the mythology around it is that these early archaeologists went into the Holy Land with a Bible in one hand, a spade in the other. And they were coming in with a very literalist view of the Bible. And they thought, now is their chance to, discover all of like biblical history just spread out before them. So they started with the book of Joshua. Why? Because Joshua really reads as like a clear historical account. Like, look, Joshua went to Jericho, Joshua went to Ai, Joshua went here. So surely we can go dig up these sites and find evidence of the ancient Israelites and their conquest. So that's how this whole thing got started. Well, as the decades rolled on and more information started to come in through this scientific research, two things started to happen. The first thing that started to happen was that when archaeologists thought they could find this easy historical discoveries of Joshua and his conquests, these things didn't turn up. Yes, certain evidence of destruction turned up at some of these sites, but these sites were destroyed at very different time periods. Not by one conquering force, not even over the same sort of decades, but some sites were like, hundreds of years apart from one another. So this was the first thing. They couldn't find evidence, clear, definitive evidence of a conquest, especially as the Bible depicts it as like one conquering force entering in and destroying city after city. So that was the first set of problems, if you will, in terms of how can we find proof of the text. And then secondly, something I think a bit more unexpected emerged. Rather than sites of Joshua's conquest, there started to be discovered hundreds of small villages cropping up throughout the Rocky Highland region. If you think, if you understand the geography of Israel and Palestine, from the Mediterranean, it's pretty flat farmland. And then when you get up towards Jerusalem, there's hills that go up and it's pretty rocky and harsh terrain. In that Rocky Highland area, they started to discover all of these villages that started to emerge around the end of the Bronze Age, beginning of the Iron Age. For most folks, they don't know when that is. That is 1200 BCE. So 1200 years before Christ, before the Common Era, these villages start cropping up, and they have some unique commonalities amongst them. First of all, they're farming villages. These aren't villages that are fortified, that are set out as warring people. These are people, subsistence farmers, some shepherds. They're keeping some livestock. And it seems that a lot of them were built in a circular pattern where they had these houses. So think of a square house. That kind of the center of the house was a place where you could do work, and on the sides of the house there were places to keep farm animals, and then the families would sleep on one end of the house. These houses were built right next to each other, so they shared walls, and they were built into circular patterns. And so these circle villages really started cropping up everywhere, and they started cropping up at a particular time when the Egyptian empire that was ruling that entire region started to collapse. And for many years, scholars didn't understand, why did the Egyptians just randomly start to collapse? This was a big mystery in folks in that circle for a while. And we started to get answers as little as like 10, 15 years ago. Archaeologists and archaeobotanists started taking pollen samples from the bottom of the Sea of Galilee. And they discovered that right in this time period, a huge drought hit the area. And that this drought was traced to a climate change that occurred, whereas ice sheets off of Greenland melted and it warmed the Mediterranean. And this warming created irregular weather patterns, droughts, and it started to create chaos in the systems that were there. And it started to create migrations of peoples. And it's out of this tension that it seems that the Egyptian empire collapsed. So to really understand the importance of these villages, we have to kind of understand what was going on with the Egyptian empire during that time period. And what we see happening is that Egypt and the Pharaoh quite literally ruled this area of ancient Israel and Palestine, or ancient Canaan, through the use of vassal kings that were indigenous Canaanites but loyal to Pharaoh. And these kings ruled with a lot of wealth inequality and injustice. So this was not a good time to be anyone except the elite class. And so folks were really seeking out just a basic way of life. And it was really difficult to survive this time. People would often have to sell themselves into slavery to be able to get by. And there was just massive starting to be social unrest. And right as this climate change starts to hit, these villages start cropping up. And we start to notice something fundamentally different through the archaeological record of these villages, that there's not a stratified class system. How do we know that? Because there's not a big palace like we see in these city states. There's not an elite class that has all of these bigger houses, nice, wealthy items, bronze tools, whatever. These folks were all the same. They started using technologies to deal with the climate change that were new to this time, and they wouldn't have been able to survive without it. They started to use wells or cisterns that were chalk lined, and that helped them preserve water. What little water that they had, they could preserve it over several months or a year. They started to create terraced agriculture. They would backfill into these cliffs and be able to grow food even when there wasn't actually area to grow crops, and they could water that crops with this preserved water. And there's something else important to note about these people. They were very close to the Egyptian power centers, these city-states. They were within a few kilometers often, but they were essentially off the grid. And that's because Egyptian horses and chariots literally could not go off-road up into these highland areas to discipline these people, to bring them back into the fold. And so these folks had a chance to get off the grid of empire and start to do something differently. And we see what they were doing can actually be identified as almost utopian in a way that maybe goes a little bit too far, but they were seeking to create a way of life that was in contrast to these harsh economic and unjust conditions of empire. And they started to flourish. Their numbers grew beyond what would have just been possible through natural birth rates. So they start to become a diverse group, but what's holding them together is these practices that are anti-empire, we could say. And they had a self-consciousness about it. And how do we know that? Because they started to write texts. They invented their own written language. This is where we get the invention of written Hebrew from these highland settlement villages. This is a radical act to write something down. Before this time in this region, the only people that could write stuff down was the empire. And they wrote things down like who was owed what money to who was enslaved. Language and written language was very much about the administrative empire. And it was very much about controlling and managing resources. When these people started to invent their own language, they could write their own law codes. They could write their own stories. This was radical. And they did. And they started to write some of the oldest texts that we have in the Hebrew Bible, some of the really early Hebrew law codes before the 10 Commandments even. And these law codes were things such as you can't hold land for more than 7 years. It's going to go back to the collective. You can't hold a slave or an indentured servant for more than 7 years. They're going to be free after that. And so there was this ethos that was fundamentally different than empire. And it's here that archaeologists and biblical scholars argue that these folks were proto-Israelite. They were the origins of the Hebrew people that would later then grow into an Israelite ethnic identity and religion. But it's from this movement out of empire that we get the very origins of the Israelite identity or the Hebrew people. And that's pretty radical, I think.
It's pretty radical, but I need you to touch this before Bishop Flunder comes.
Okay.
Why does that matter for the people of faith today?
Thought you'd never ask. Okay, why does this matter? It matters for a couple reasons. And I'll tell you first and foremost, it matters because origin stories matter. What do I mean by origin stories? I mean those stories we tell about ourselves that explain where we came from, who we are as a people. All of us have different origin stories. They might be our family origin stories, our nation's origin stories, our particular community's origin stories. But as a people of faith, we have faith origin stories. And origin stories have particular power because they shape our identity. They're not just a random story you tell one off. These are stories that we go back to, and part of our human psychology builds our identity from these origin stories. When we look at the biblical texts, the Bible has several origin stories, but it has a particular story that has shaped Christian identities for a very long time, and that's the conquest story in the book of Joshua. This is an origin story that tells us that a very dramatic part of the start of our biblical traditions started through war and genocide and conquest, essentially a colonial template that we could read in the book of Joshua. That has been shaping our Christian tradition, whether we want it to or not. Whether we deny it or not, theologize around that story, somehow try to make it good. Whether we like it or not, there is a fundamental template of colonialism and genocide as one of our origin stories. When we think back, who are we as a people of faith? Where did Jesus come from if we're Christians? Jesus came from this somehow. And that shaped us. And I argue that because it's part of one of our origin stories, it's very quick to rise to the surface and be inflamed when somebody wants power or land. We've got this origin story that can justify it for us. So the very fact that in this moment, in a time such as this, we as the church or as the biblical faith traditions would be given a brand new origin story that would literally emerge from the earth in the last 100 years, and it would say something very different about who we are as a people of faith. It would say, you all came from a people who struggled with empire. You all came from a place where you were dealing with wealth inequality, where you were dealing with climate change, where you were dealing with just the hard oppression of an elite class that didn't care about you. And out of that, you use the innovative resources, the technologies you had available to come together in a diverse group and find a new way of life that honored each other, the humanity in each other, the respect for everyone, and created a way where there was open borders that other people could join you if they too were struggling. That's a radical new story, and that's a story that can invite us to reshape our identities today as people of faith, but it can also inspire us. That's the other thing about historical origin stories. They give us a window into the present. They inspire us to say, we too can do that. So just like if you look at the history of Christian empire, reading the Joshua story, they said, oh, we too can do that. We can take any land we want. We can kill these people with impunity, just like Joshua did with the Canaanites. That's a particular type of inspiration that comes from an origin story. But when we get this story from the Highland settlements, it says, wow, as people of faith, we can live into this idea of creating more just communities, of using our own innovation and our own community building skills to create more just ways of life for one another that cares for everyone, that's diverse, that's open to the stranger to come and join the movement, that's using the tools of language that might be new. Back then it was written language. Today, look at us broadcasting all over the world. These are language tools. Our ancestors used these tools to do something different. They subverted these tools of empire and used them to create law codes that were for the common good. And so these aren't templates that we follow, but these are inspiring stories. Part of the way that we work as humans, especially when we're talking about origin stories, is that they help us imagine where we're going, not just where we've been. And so for those reasons, fundamentally, this is a key, I think, prophetic story for us in this moment as the church.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kate. This is the gospel. This is the good news. This is
Amen.
the sound of Pentecost that should be heard all over this world. I know Bishop Flunder is going to add to this. I'm going to let her come in right now. But I want to acknowledge Pastor Quentin Robertson from Philly, Pastor Karen Coleman from Boston, Bishop Bonnie Radden out of Las Vegas, Pastor Pamela Williams from Philadelphia, Reverend Dr. Tracy Denise Swire from Palm Springs, Bishop Paris LaBelle from the Carolinas, Natasha Ivory, and I believe Ohio. Yeah, I see the people chiming in, and we say God bless you tonight, Bishop Flunder.
So, my whole soul has been made glad.
Mine's too, Bishop.
My Lord, I'm all up in the Third Testament now. But let me just say, a couple of things that came up for me. I think it is time, way past time, and I say that as a progeny of slaves, progeny of women kicked to the curb, people who thought that our way of being, our way of worship, our background was diminished, needed to be diminished, and we needed to have something greater. And it's caused a lot of us to try to emulate things that are a sickness to us. And yes, it is time to become a Bible, not to just read one, but to become one that echoes our greatness. And in some ways, it's time to build our own path to our understanding of God. It's time for us to sing freedom songs again. Maybe change them a little bit, but I like, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. That kind of, because we don't want to lose that. That's ours. I'll say that for the people from whom I am, the womb out of which I was born. But I think we need to sing it more and more and more and more. And I think it is time for us to come to know God before we seek to know the books. And as much as that may sound kind of sideways to some of us, I think that the way that the books, the testaments were not written for our liberty. They were not written to liberate us. They weren't talking about us. They didn't even imagine that we could exist. That, as I say often, slaves were to obey their masters and women were to keep silent in the churches. And so how then could the liberatory word of God liberate us if it continues to shackle us? We have to find the God that liberates. And that may mean to just close the thing up for a while and spend some time seeking to know, because here's what I do know. I do know that the Spirit of God and the presence of God does speak to us. Psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, dreams and visions, sometimes by the voice of a child. It is in the best interest of our Creator to communicate with us. But the problem is a lot of what is communicating with us is not coming from our Creator. It is coming, stealing the Creator's time with us, with the things that our Creator has no intention for us to be bound and troubled with. And finally, this. I think we sort of need to forget and start over. I love what you're saying, Dr. K. What would happen to our faith path if we just kind of forget for a minute and start over and begin this time with our personal and intimate relationship with the God of our understanding? What would happen if we started there? What would happen? I somehow believe people say, well, the people they'll do hellish and low-lifed and loose-living things in their lives. I said, no, I don't see that. I don't think that we're that kind, or in that kind of place with our understanding of the divine. Because what happened when there was nothing written? Pre-Christianity. What did the people do before they even knew how to write or thought in that way, right? Taught religion. Being taught religion by people who hate us is a part of why we are so sick today. We were taught religion and taught to get in your place. Don't get out of your place. We were taught a religion that was a girdle, and I'm talking about a mean, hateful girdle, the kind that had eyes on it. Some of you all don't go back that far. Back in the church when nothing could jiggle, there would be no jiggling in the church.
It had a hook and eye, a hook and eye.
An eye, baby. And had to hook that thing up. You understand what I'm talking about? And you go to church, you couldn't hardly breathe. And trying to go to church and enjoy church, that is the way in many ways that people are using God as a tool. And that is why a group of people in our country are making a despot a prophet.
Come on now.
He's a despot. You cannot unring that bell. Watch his history, watch his current realities, see with whom he makes a friend. And here's the real one, beloved. Watch the people who are terrified. They don't agree with him either. But he has created a way to make them feel that if you disagree with me, I will flush your life down the toilet. There's no way in the world that came from the heart of our Creator. Our Creator does not need to be a despot. Our Creator can speak and you're gone. Our Creator does not have a spirit of fear. There's something desperately wrong with this reality, and it's not new. It has happened before. The question is now, will we hear from this prophet that is speaking to us today, who has taken the time to do the work to get this chain off our ankles and give us the strength to know God the way God would have us know God? Thank you so much, Dr. K.
Oh, yes, yes. Listen, if you're listening tonight, you're listening to the prophets speak, and they are speaking powerfully tonight. This is Dr. Kate Carmen about undoing conquest, ancient Israel, the Bible, and the future of Christianity. Dr. Kate has agreed to give away a book. And so we will have a book giveaway tonight. If you put hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers, all one word, you can win the opportunity to get the book. Let me just make a very strong suggestion. If you don't win the book, you're going to want to buy it. You're going to want to buy it. You want to share with your pastor. Okay. And you'll want to have a little coffee and tea and some pastries and have a conversation about what is going on in this book, right? Because what's going on in this book is actually what's happening in this world right now. I told the people yesterday that I was in conversation with that we are in Babylon. But somebody said, how can we sing in a strange land? We can still sing in a strange land. We can still sing our songs, right? Somewhere in that text it says, still build your houses, still have babies, still do all the things you're going to do. At the end of the day, Dr. K. Common, what you are saying is right and is righteous. Bishop Flunder, what you are saying is right and is righteous. And we've got to find a way to reimagine what we are doing, what we're doing in church, what we're doing around Christianity, what we're doing in the world. We have to find a way to reimagine. There's a song we talk about, sing a new world into being. I'm hoping that we can do that. I'm hoping that we can reimagine, Bishop.
And the march, don't forget the march.
Yeah.
When the march began, they came to us. You know that, Bishop Vanessa.
Yes.
Talked to us.
Yep.
And empowered us. And where I live right now,
no King's March she's talking about, y'all.
King. The people fill the streets. And I don't care how folks are acting like they don't really care and it's no big deal. You better believe that they care. You better believe that they're trying, because they know already it's going to happen again. And then it will happen again. And then it, just like it did right in front of the people's house when Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. It will happen again if we will understand again what God and the God of our understanding, by all of God's many names, what God intends for us to do.
Yes. Now, Dr. Kate, I have more questions for you. I just want to shout out Hollow Rain. Thank you for joining us. West Seattle, Washington is here. Reverend DJ, thank you for being on. Nashville, Tennessee is in the house. Grateful for your presence. Bishop Allison Abrams, thank you for your presence tonight. Maryland, D. Williams is on as well. We greet you. Liz Gates is on. We greet you as well. And all of the folks still yet coming into the room, we are grateful. Lawan, thank you for being on, Reverend Lawan. All of you. And I need you all to start sharing with others about this conversation. Dr. K, you talk about the conquest imagination. I'm going to stay here for a minute. There are other questions I have, but I feel like because we don't speak about it enough, right? That sometimes people really don't have the understanding. You talk about the conquest imagination. You describe Christianity as shaped by a theological imagination of conquest. Those are your words in that book. Can you unpack that for us and share how it shows up in modern church life, in mission, or in leadership?
Absolutely. So when I talk about Christianity having an imagination of conquest, it's getting back to that idea that fundamentally within our faith tradition, we've been taught in part through the story of Joshua, but more so in the ways that the Christian tradition has lived into and embodied that story. And that has become part of the DNA of our faith, whether we want it to be or not. And that imagination plays out in a supremacy that somehow Christianity is chosen, that we are the new chosen people, that it plays out through these ideas and imagination that we find in the Hebrew text that came out of a very particular moment in history at a particular time with a people dealing with particular oppressions. And we've taken that and said, that's us. And that's us oftentimes has been the empire. And so they've taken on Christianity, Christendom, all of the traditions that we come out of embodied that. And so the imagination, we need to imagine something before we embody it. And so this imaginary of conquest was there before people started conquering. And so what an imagination of conquest does is that it theologically justifies all the violence that we want to do. And so this template we see in Joshua, it's a colonial template. When we look at the walls of Jericho and they came crumbling down, what happens right after that? Joshua and his army go in. It says they took the silver and gold. So they stole the resources. Then they killed the oxen and the goats and the sheep.
Did.
Then what did they do? They killed the women and men. It says they gave them up as an offering to destruction to the Lord. Then they killed the young and the old. So no one
They committed genocide.
Yeah, that's the story we've been given. And the irony is that story didn't play out on the ground the way that it was written. That story came out of trauma. The people that wrote that story were on the end of the conquering empire, and they wrote it to scaffold their own identity, to feel like they had a sense of power and control when it was completely taken from them. And so that text gets written, but fast forward 1,000 years, and now that text becomes an actual tool of empire, and real conquests following that template happened, where they came in and they took the lands. When we look at the Americas, they came in, they took the gold. The Spanish took the gold. They killed the people. Or they used their theological imagination to say, nothing matters except whether you're a Christian or not. And we see that this is the origins, this conquest imagination is the origins of the white supremacist racial system that we have, comes out of the conquest of the Americas. And so this imaginary then it's satanic. It says we can take whatever land, kill whatever people, and God blesses it. We can enslave people and God blesses that. We can do whatever we want and God blesses it. Because if God's blessing taking the resources, killing not just the men and women, but the young and the old, there's nothing we can't do. And our history is riddled with it. And I think what we're seeing today, we are seeing the fruits of this tradition. And
Yep.
they are not good fruits.
We can do anything we want to do if we put God on it. We can make anything that we want to do holy if we can figure out how to put God on it. You're just so absolutely right. And it is very difficult for us to speak back into that kind of atmosphere if we do not claim our own intimate relationship with our own understanding of God.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I want those that are in our list on watching us, our listening audience, if you have a question for Dr. Kate Comment, I want you to put the word question and then ask the question so that we can know, we can readily see it. We want to make sure that we acknowledge you all here, and we appreciate you being on tonight. So, Dr. Kate, reading the Bible differently, how can pastors and theologians and lay readers approach text like Joshua without reproducing the violence or erasure those stories have justified? And what are the spiritual disciplines that help us hold scripture responsibly? Because that's the problem. People have not learned, they have not studied, they do not know, and so they are holding the scriptures irresponsibly.
To answer this question, I think there's two ways that we can go, and I'll start with the first way. The first way is, if we are going to continue to bring this text forward, and when I say text, I mean the entire biblical text as our sacred text, continue to call it the Word of God, we have to understand that there are, just as Bishop Flunder was saying, there are some real texts that are right there ready to help people justify enslavement, to help people justify the oppression of women. It's all right there. Whatever you want to justify by God, there is a Bible text for you, my friend. And we've seen that play out. The opposite is true too. If there is a text that you want to use to liberate the enslaved, there are texts, there are stories, there are traditions there too, to take care of the stranger, to welcome the immigrant. All of those texts are there. And that's great. But we can't stop acting like this book speaks some monolithic liberatory truth. Because when we start reading it, and I invite people, read the text and stop doing theological gymnastics to justify what you find there. It takes
Not
a little.
theological gymnastics. I love that. I'm gonna use that.
You better go ahead. You better go head on. That's what you better do. That's working for me
Because
too.
that's what I heard growing up. Oh yes, it was unfortunate that God called Joshua to kill the Canaanites, but God's ways aren't our ways. We can't understand God's ways or the good one. Well, God's a just God, and so if God he called for the killing of all the Canaanites, it's because the Canaanites were just that bad. So, these are just examples of the ways we read the text. I think inside us, our spirit hurts when they hear that. And then what do? Instead of listening to the spirit inside of us, we try to justify the text. And so I invite people, read the text.
You're right, especially if the text is giving us license to do the same kinds of vitriolic things to people. People love that part. Well, the Bible said I could pop you in the mouth if I should want to do that.
Not
Because
pop you in the mouth, Bishop. Come
I
on
can pop
now.
you in the mouth. I can walk right up on you and pop you right in the mouth. It's in the Bible. The Bible said that I can do it. And people love that and leapfrog over, as you said, the other conversation about how popping somebody in the mouth is not correct. And you spot on. We decide what we want, and then we cherry pick it. Let's see, what do I need to get out of the book, and let me then go to the book and cherry pick it and use it that way. That's not relationship with our Creator. That is not. That is not relationship. That doesn't listen to the heart of God. And Bishop Vanessa, dangerously, let me also say that the heart of God, the heart of the Creator, has shown up in many religions and faiths. It's certainly not unique to Christianity. And the more we read, and the more we listen, and the more we reach out, we can find a certain sameness in where the heart of the Creator, by all of the Creator's many names and magnificent manifestations, if we can move beyond the negativity that so many of us have been bathed in the majority of our life.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Dr. Kate, for answering that question. I asked the people for questions. I did receive one by Natasha Ivory. She said, Dr. Carmen, I read Undoing Conquest when I took Engaging the Bible with Community and Culture with you, which I enjoyed. How can we apply the reimagining / future ideology from the book to this administration in terms of survival and future? That's such a great question, Natasha. Thank you.
Thanks, Natasha, and hi. Glad you're here. So to answer this, I want to circle back to what we were just talking about, because I think there's a second thing that's really key for us when we're thinking about the biblical texts, and that's going to help me answer, how do we apply this? What do we do right now in this moment? And this is this idea that if we can go back in our history, I said it at the beginning, these ancient people invented the written text. The empires had invented the written text, and they were using it to oppress people. And what was so liberating around our Hebrew ancestors writing their own law codes down, writing their stories down, was that they had real agency and power. They could write. And people at that time treated writing as divine, because this was magic. You could write something, you could carve it into a tablet. We see that in our tradition when Moses goes up to the mountaintop, he comes down with tablets that were carved by God. It wasn't just that God, the finger of God wrote those. It was the fact that humans could write anything at this time was magical, was divinely inspired. And so to become a people of the book, for the Torah to be written, that's so important and sacred, because these were an oppressed minority of people finally able to write their own stuff down, write their own laws. Okay. We need to fast forward. When we're hearing from Bishop Flunder talking about the ways in which people are using the text, we have outgrown the text as divinely inspired, because we have subverted that and we've used it to oppress. So we're right back where the empire was oppressing people with the written language. We've given our power, our God-given creativity and agency for relationship with God away to a text. We've said, this is God's word. We've limited God's voice to one set of texts. And sometimes that set of texts contains texts of terror. And so I believe that we're at a moment where we as people of faith have to start thinking and speaking and connecting with God outside the text and saying, this too is God's word. It doesn't mean we have to give up our Bible. It doesn't mean we have to say this still isn't the word of God, but it means we have to be in relationship with it responsibly. We have to keep the safety on the Bible, because sometimes the Bible and those texts are dangerous and they lead people to kill. So there's a lot of work we have to do to carefully pass our sacred text forward. But we also need to recognize that we are a people whose communication just exploded. We're now living in a digital world. We haven't had a communication revolution like this since the Gutenberg printing press, when we get sola scriptura, because people now have access and they can read. This is what happened with our ancient Hebrews. They could now write and read. Here we are in a different communication paradigm. And what does that mean for us as people of faith who are people of the word? And so that's what leads us to today. So getting to Natasha's question, we are seeing the excesses and the horrors of when this new human tools of communication are used for disinformation, to prop up despots, to seek to divide, and to create whatever narrative they want. We have to get our truth elsewhere. Our truth has to come from in here. And that truth is that we fundamentally know what's right and wrong. We don't need a biblical text to tell us that. The biblical text says we have the Spirit. The Spirit will lead us into all truth. And so we as people of faith have to start imagining what does our faith tradition look like in this moment that's fundamentally different than any moment we've had as humans. And we're seeing the ways in which it's being abused. And so we as a people of faith need to come out and lead and say, this is what it means to be Christian. We don't follow this text blindly. We don't follow this text and somehow agree that it's okay to oppress our neighbor or our immigrant or our queer neighbor or our trans neighbor. We know that's wrong. And I don't care if there's a text that says it's right in the Bible, because the Spirit is leading us into truth. So we need to start taking our power back, our God-given power. And we've given it away for too long. And so now I think is a chance. And I think the ways we embody these ideas in the book, the ways that we undo conquest, is to start with ourselves and say, I am going to trust the still small voice that I hear, and that it's not that hard. Jesus was pretty clear about loving your neighbor. That's not rocket science. We don't need to really make it complicated. And we need to, as the church, I think, start to embody the fact that we're a living tradition. And that means that we can start to make changes. We are not just beholden to some tradition that's just been, baked into us. And it's our job not to question, not to do new things, not to do innovative things. Actually, no, it's our job to listen and to follow the Spirit and to be open to creative iteration and trying new things. And that's fundamentally, where I go in the book and what I've been working on with churches around the country and now in some places around the world, is saying it's time for a new season for the church. It's time for a season of the church to really get real about what has happened in the past, and to get real about the healing that needs to happen, both individually and collectively, and the real reconciliation and repair, especially in churches that are direct descendants of these long histories of colonialism.
You better come on, Dr. Kate.
We have got to start to do that work, because we can't pretend it didn't happen, just like we can't pretend there's not violent texts in our holy word. We've got to start looking. We've got to start, and it doesn't end there. We have to start being intentional about repair, and we have to invite the Spirit and her wisdom to say, how can we repair these things that are just so horrific? The genocides in our past, the histories of enslavement in our past, the ways in which we've treated not only our fellow humans, but the animals on this planet, the planet herself. How can we even begin to repair that? But I believe we're being called into a season of that. And so that only then can we start to imagine, where are we going to go? Not just where are we going to go with this country and this administration, but where are we going to go as a people of faith? And I think if the church can get out in front of this and say, we're going to do our healing work and we're going to do our imaginative work, then we can lead in this moment when I'm not seeing a lot of leadership out there. And I think it's the church's time. We can step up and say, we're not going to lead as conquerors, but we are going to lead with humility and realizing that God is still speaking, and she's speaking through the works of justice and caring for one another.
Yes and amen.
I know that you want to buy this book, people. I'm just saying, she gonna give away a copy of a book. We said that already. Get hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. But I know that you want to buy this book for somebody. You want to send it to every pastor you know, because these are the people that actually need this book. You want to get in your book circle. You want to get in your chit chat and chew, coffee and tea, however you want to do it. And you all want to start having these real discussions, because Dr. Kate, you talk about undoing and repair. You went right to my next question. And I just see all the people chiming in. You can look in the comment section and see all the people and what they have to say. But in your view, what does undoing actually look like? Are there examples of congregations or communities that are embodying repair and reimagining life beyond conquest?
Wait, just please, Vanessa, because I
Yes,
want
go ahead.
to this
Say
into her
that.
response. It reminds me of what England did on the continent of Africa. To go in, dig deep, pull the stones up, come back later and say, it was not really the will of God for us to treat people of African descent this way. And so we're going to fix this. We are going to get out of the way. We're going to go back home and not leave you. And somebody said, but what about our jewels? What about what you took out of the ground, especially the big one that's in the Queen's crown? What about our jewels? No, well, no, we can't give you back your jewels, but we are not going to continue to. No, but the point is, if you really mean right, then give us back our jewels.
If you really be right,
I'm going to stop.
Dr. K.
The type of healing work we're talking about is it's the work of many generations, because what you're describing is what I would say a surface level attempt at repair without reparation, because reparation is paying back what was stolen, and nobody wants to do that because we don't want to acknowledge, in this country, we don't want to acknowledge the labor that was stolen, let alone the lives, let alone and how do we, these are huge questions, and the only answer that I've come up with is that it has to be done collectively, and it has to be done with a real heart. The heart has to be aligned right. It's not a performative thing. And it's got to be done in a way that allows the spirit, if that's something, or the spirit of justice, that can really work. And so the thing that I've developed, in part thinking in terms of my marketing background, where from a marketing standpoint, a design standpoint, I've seen the power of when we live into a cycle every year, what change that it can produce. And one of the inspirations was thinking of the Coca-Cola company. If you think of the Coca-Cola company, I'm not condoning Coke, but they fundamentally reshaped Christmas through their marketing campaign. For the last 100 years, every year at Christmas, they've given us Jolly Santa Claus in the red coat. They've given us polar bears.
But they actually have a theme song that I've probably been singing since a little girl. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I like to buy the world a coat. You know, that's the
they've
song I
done it.
sing, and we've been singing this song for years since I was a little girl.
Yeah, Coke has changed Christmas. And why did they change Christmas? Because nobody wants to drink Coke when it's cold. It's a summer drink. Okay, why are we talking about Coke? Because there is something powerful when we return to something and we invest in it every year. Real change can happen. So my thought is, if Coca-Cola can change one of Christianity's holidays, how much more can the church do if we really get invested and return to something every year? We do not need $1 billion marketing campaign, because we have communities who meet every Sunday looking for a good word, looking to practice the faith. And so what if we build this healing work into the calendar year of our church life, into the rhythms of church? And so I developed what's called the Season of Origins, which is a 4-week liturgical season, or season of the church, that's focused on this healing work. Just like Advent, each day of this 4-week season has a particular theme that invites our communities into the type of reflection, healing, and prayer and action that's needed. So the first week of Origins is Invite. This is a chance for us to invite lost stories, marginalized voices, those people that were told they didn't matter. This is a chance for us to center those voices and say, these voices we need for a time such as this. The second week of Origins is Name. It's here where we start to get real and look at our histories. What is there? What do I need to grieve? What do I need to repent from? That leads us into the third week, which is Repair. And here is where we start to invite the Spirit to say, what true repair can happen? How do we return the jewels, if I can borrow that metaphor? How do we really go and fix this? Even though some things can't be fixed, but how can we seek real reconciliation? And that leads us to the fourth week, which is Imagine. Where are we going as a church? Where's the Spirit calling us? Because I don't believe we can get to Imagine without those other steps. It's a restorative justice process. We can't just pretend this stuff didn't happen and tell people to get over it. We've got to do the work. So Season of Origins is an ecumenical project that I launched this year with some grant money. And so I've been able to work with about 8 churches across the US. Now we have churches coming in from Europe that are interested. And it's essentially, let's come together as an ecumenical group of pastors and church leaders and start to design what this looks like in our different contexts and then practice it. So we're actually right now in the middle of this first season of Origins. We're in week 3. And there's UCC churches, American Baptist churches, Episcopal, Methodist, non-denominational. I'll be preaching at the Riverside Church this weekend. They're rolling it out. And so it's a chance for us to collectively have a moment to start to do this work. And it's not just one time, that this is designed just like the Coca-Cola company or just like Advent or Lent, that we have to return to it every year, because healing is a spiral. It's a cycle. And the type of depth of healing that we need and the type of depth of imagination that we need is only going to come out of this kind of deeply rooted work, not just one church, not just one denomination, but the collective, the groups of us that are saying we've got to shift this pattern of and this imagination of conquest that has really littered our faith. So Origins is a way to do that.
Can I say one thing, Bishop Vanessa? It is so yes, by the way, and amen. And simultaneously, the more I know about the history of my people and the current realities for the folks that I serve and serve with, the more I know, the angrier I become. I've learned how to push it down and function through it. But sometimes and my testimony, sometimes when I'm all alone, and sometimes in my dream life, sometimes when I'm just overwhelmed by the news, there are times that I struggle internally. And I'm a person, people will tell you that I'm a person that loves people and given to forgive. But then there are some things that are so horrible that I have not even shared some of them with some of the people who are closest to me. I let it go. I release it so that it doesn't have a certain kind of power over me. Yeah, and I think you may understand what it is that I'm saying. So the question I have, what do we really need to do when we gather in the ways in which you have shared in terms of meeting with people? What do we do in those circles to let go of the pain and what is inside and what has a tendency to take up territory inside? And perhaps there are people that hear us tonight that are trying to leap over the pain part of Bishop Vanessa, another despot is now trying to diminish women, trying to diminish people of color, trying to diminish gay people. And the anger that was calming down is now way pissed off again, if you understand. And I'm sure you do understand. Where in those conversations where the people who have embraced being diminished, and sometimes other people who are a part of those conversations are the diminishers who are trying to get free. You know, so talk to us just a little bit, Dr. Kate, before we.
Well, it's, you know, I can speak to this experience as a queer person, as a queer white non-binary person, so it's limited. But the thing that's been coming up as I'm working with my own congregation on this is that I need healing from the church trauma. And I discovered, when you're talking about what's inside, when I was leading this retreat to design origins, and we were sitting in a cohort and we were talking about what do we need, and suddenly I was like, I made this whole thing because I want to try to make a safer church, because I don't want to keep getting harmed by the church. So I was like, oh, this is obviously coming out of my own trauma. But it's the thing that the group of folks that I've been leading with here in Northampton was like, oh, we need to, we as leaders, because we're all women leaders in this moment, or non-binary women leaders, we're trying to lead something where we can have healing, and we all need we're really wounded by the church. So we're starting, I mean, in our one little particular context, we're realizing we need to do some healing work. We need to, you know, and in some cases we're talking about deep trauma. And so how can we get support, actual support from clinicians to help us start to deal with this, both as leaders, but then if we're going to open this up to our congregations, because what you're talking about is deep, deep wounds. And we can't just shallowly, just like we can't shallowly offer like a repair without an actual reparation. We can't invite people to look into these traumas without really being able to hold it in the best of our ways with what we know about trauma. And so my hope is that if churches start to do this work, that we can, part of it is supporting those deeply wounded spaces. And many times that wound came out of the church itself. So what does that mean when we're in this space? Even some of our liberative churches, they're wounding us. So what does that mean? What does it mean when there's maybe still people in the community? And it's a systemic issue. But I'm hoping that we can create space to start seeking what it might look like in our communities. And I know even when I think about origins and we think, okay, not just maybe personally, but collectively, this small group of churches that I'm working with, one is a historic Black church. And in our early meetings, they were like, why do we need origins? Like, we need to heal from the church. And I'm like, exactly. Like, this is going to show up very differently depending on what kind of church you are, depending on what kind of people are in your church and what histories are there. But to come at it together and say some of this healing might be cross churches, and say, look, some of it's within the congregation itself saying, look, you harmed me. How can we seek repair? And some of it's more collective. You big churches harmed us. How do we repair internally on these bigger questions? So what I know is I don't know how this is going to work out. What I have felt called to is saying, can we create a scaffold in the churches and let the Spirit do her work? And that's what I've been showing up to do. And I don't know what it's really going to look like. But I think if we show up together and say, we're going to dedicate this space, I think where 2 or 3 are gathered, you know, the promise is that Lord's going to be with us, that the Spirit's going to be with us. And so I just think, wow, what if a bunch of churches just showed up and said, we need help. There's too much here. Help us. What might come out of that?
That's so good, Dr. Kate. And I want to be able to say this to Bishop Flunder. I think that was a great question. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with about 12 to 15 German folk that came. They were predominantly queer, and this is their first time in New York City. And during this visit, I did a lecture for them, and the lecture was simply on decolonizing the gospel in Babylon, which is where I said we are right now in America. A Black queer woman's witness to faith, empire, and freedom. But one of the things I had to say, because you have to tell the truth when you're doing this kind of work, and sometimes the truth is tight. You know, the truth doesn't always feel good, right? But we have to be able to say, you know, I was able to say to them, you know, queerness does not erase whiteness. I had to say that to them. I think that that's very important that they heard that, and they thought that it was very important that I say it, that their liberation is bound up with their willingness to unlearn privilege that empire still affords them, a privilege that I don't have, right? And so I said, this whole decolonizing the gospel is not about just translating my pain, Bishop Flunder. It's also about them redistributing power, right? It means that you know, they don't just admire the Black church, but they support it, and they support it with resources, and they stand beside us when the state starts to come for us. And so, like, all of these things that we have to have real conversations about, that sometimes I think that we don't think that we can, but these people were willing to hear me. And I think that that's important, that our voices are heard even through this time that we're in. It's a very painful time for all of us. For some, it's reminiscent of things that have happened in the past. It's reminiscent of Jim Crow. You speak to my mother, she's 86 years old, but she can tell you right now that this is reminiscent of where she came from. Born in 1939. So it's not different. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that I said that, right? So these
Thank you
things,
so
Bishop.
much. Thank you so much. Yes. And thank you so much, Dr. Kate. Thank
Dr.
you.
Kate, I want to give the opportunity to you to have a final statement. I want to also give one to Bishop Flunder as well. Like, I do have two more questions, but we are way past our time, because this is the conversation that needed to happen tonight. This is the conversation that I want people to be able to take back to their pulpits, to their sanctuaries, to their pastors, to their congregations. I also want people to get in touch with you to find out how they can also be a part of the next cohort of churches, because this is the real deal. This is the work that people need to be doing. So if you don't mind, Bishop Flunder, go ahead.
Let's get it to T, fam. I'm going to close this up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep.
This was outstanding, and what we really need in this time. And I am confident, Dr. Kate, I am confident that the God that loves us is going to give us what it is that we need to move forward. We are not dead. I buried a lot of people in my life. So we are not dead. We're alive, and we are prepared. And I believe that it will come through the kinds of conversations that we're having right now. The truth is, to live is Christ. To die is gain. What we're supposed to be doing right now, however, is living and bringing life in all the ways that we can. I want to say thank you, and thank you to all of those who are listening to us tonight, and all of your questions and all your statements, and I'm going to be reading all your stuff. God bless you. God bless you.
Dr. Common, I want to thank you in advance. I'll say it again. I just feel like this is a conversation that need to be had, and I really am interested in people taking cohorts with you. That you have so many cohorts, so many churches, over a period of time, and I think that that's how we change the church and the minds of people when we do things. We think that this is a small thing, but this, to me, I see it as something so big and something that can just grow into even something bigger by going from church to church and place to place and saying, hey, this is what we have to offer you. This is what we're doing. And you know what? Come with me on this 6-7 week journey that we need to be on together, right? Dr. Common, your last statements to us?
I feel like we are in this crisis, and and then I feel that there's a mustard seed moment happening where we do have what we need, and there's energy for it, there's passion for it. And so I'm every day that I'm out doing this work and having conversations like this, it's filling my soul with hope and joy, and it's making me see that God's with us. And yeah, it's just I'm constantly in awe and wonder, and I feel like we're here in this moment, and God's working through us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kate. I want everybody to hold tight. We have a few announcements, and they want to give away the book tonight, please. We also want to make sure you purchase that book as well. You can look in the chat to see how you can do it. And so we just want you to support our broadcast. You can send a donation to PayPal, www.paypal.me/TFAMJustice. And, this helps us to continue to do the work. It helps us to continue to get great authors and continue to promote their books and to continue to get artists and musicians and talk about what really matters, faith, justice, and having a dialogue around current events and what's going on in this world. So we appreciate your support, and we say God bless you, everyone. We want to take this time to make sure you have hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers. Make sure you're putting it in. I see your comments, Pastor Charles. Yes, the Spirit of the Lord is upon and within us. God is with us. Indeed. Thank you so much. I see all of the people. I'm giving you time to write hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers so that you can win the book. Sister Cheryl Robinson Moore said, a rich and thoughtful, provoking conversation. Thank you. We appreciate you very much. Thank you all for watching tonight. And I want to make sure you got hashtag Beyond the Gatekeepers if you want a copy of the book. Kisa Nygreen, thank you so much. She says, thank you to you, Dr. Common, and thank you, Beyond the Gatekeepers, for bringing this to us. I so appreciate all the comments. God bless you all tonight. Yes, yes, yes. I see you all. Brenda Ann Brown, God bless you. Thank you for being on. All right, Pastor Sue, I think that the people that put the hashtag in, it's coming up, and I think that we might be ready to go. D. Williams, which is, I believe, Minister David Williams, has won a copy of the book. We say congratulations to you, Minister David. We're going to get your full address down. You make sure you send it to me. I'll get it to Dr. Common. They'll make sure the book gets to you. I want to say thank you again, Dr. Common. Of course, thank you, Bishop Flunder, also holding the line with me on tonight, as always. And to all of you who continue to watch Beyond the Gatekeepers, we are grateful for you. We are grateful for your presence. And by the grace of God, we hope to see you next week. Thank you for joining us.